Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to The Upside. This is our virtual show brought to you by the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore and JMOR Magazine to keep you informed during this time of uncertainty. If you have questions for our guests today, please be sure to type them into the Zoom chat or message us on JMOR's Facebook page. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our host today, Beth Goldsmith, chair of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore. Scott Rifkin, the publisher of JMOR, has the day off. Beth, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Jonathan. Remote learning has put an undue burden on parents and students this past year. For students with learning differences, this transition has been even more challenging. Parents have worried that without the hands-on, individualized, and multisensory approaches their children need, they will fall farther and farther behind. At the Macks Center for Jewish Education, CJE, an agency of the Associated, dedicated professionals have risen to the occasion, developing programs and adaptations to ensure that children with learning challenges find success. Jonathan, you want to introduce Amian, please?
You bet. So today we are very excited to welcome Amian Kelemer, who is the CEO of the Macks Center for Jewish Education, an agency of the Associated. She has a wonderful reputation. Many of you who probably have heard her before, and if not, you're in for a treat today. Amian, thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure. Thank you so much, Beth and Jonathan.
So why don't you start off, Amian, by telling our audience what CJE does to address the needs of individuals with learning differences?
Okay.
Share your wisdom with us.
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. Behind me is a wonderful team of professionals, and we're also part of a network, as Beth mentioned. The Associated's agency system provides supports for the community of individuals with disabilities. In CJE specifically, we provide Jewish education programs. E is in our name, education, and an example of that is Gesher LaTorah, which is really the longest running program for Jewish kids to access Jewish education in the country. It started before the PL 94-142, before the law that sort of authorized that opportunity. We also provide advocacy programs. An example is Maryland SNAP, which is Special Needs Advocacy Project. It's the last free advocacy project in the state of Maryland to be able to support families who need help going through the public system and be more inclusive, which is about training our community to be more welcoming and inclusive for people with disabilities. We also provide funding and resources. And so examples of that are STARS, which is a program for kids who are in day schools to be able to access financial support, to be able to access testing, and also access to the Jill Fox Memorial Fund. This is for families of kids impacted by mental illness, childhood obesity, or autism spectrum disorders. We provide sensory kits to be able to help families include their kids, and a whole library of books and resources around these topics. That's kind of the big picture of what we're doing.
Wonderful, thank you. Beth,
So while we're speaking about the big picture, talking about people with disabilities, that's quite a diverse community. Would you tell us a little more specifically, what's that picture look like in Baltimore, in our community? And so what do the people look like that we actually serve?
Thanks. It's actually a great question because I started in this work 30 years ago, approximately, and the landscape was so much different. It wasn't that the needs were different, it was that we as a Jewish community weren't responding as robustly as we are now. And so we now have a whole network through Shemesh, through the JCC, through JCS, through other community organizations like Jules and Menucha and the Friendship Circle. We're really supporting a very wide range of people. We're supporting people who can be accommodated in schools with some level of learning disability, and we're supporting families who find out about their child with special needs in as young as before birth. We're also working with adults who are in assisted living facilities. And this work takes really the whole community to lift it up. There have been so many champions along the way in our community so that 30 years ago, I would more often be speaking to the wonderful Father Ray from Francis Gallagher Services in the Catholic community than I would be speaking to colleagues in the Jewish education space. And it's really amazing how far we've come to be able to provide a comprehensive kind of approach. It would not have happened without people like Miriam Bunny Rosenberg, who was the early founder of the Rainbow Club that existed before Gesher LaTorah, or Marjorie Schulbank, who worked at the Maryland State Department of Education, now retired, or of blessed memory, Dr. Aviva Weisbord, who were just tremendous professional champions. And then a whole network of lay support, like Benji Dubin, who had been at this for so long, or Margie Hoffman, Larry Katz, the Bravermans, just a huge network of people out there to make sure that every individual with some kind of learning challenge, disability, or need has been able to be embraced by our community. And that does not mean that there is not more to do. There is so much more to do, but it's really gratifying when I had the opportunity to reflect on all of that over the time.
So, let's talk a little bit about COVID. I mean, COVID has clearly had just a challenging impact on everything the Associated does. And I just can't help but think for families whose children have these learning differences, it has to be so much more kind of compounded. So talk a little bit about, the challenges that you're hearing that these families who are raising children with disabilities are facing right now during the pandemic. What are you hearing from your constituents?
So you can imagine that the disruption of routine, which for all of us has been so challenging, and in this case, for families whose kids really thrive on, or adults who thrive on a kind of predictable routine, this has absolutely been even more challenging. And for all of us, my son is upstairs now, snow days, no longer just snow days, right? He's upstairs on his virtual school platform. But what happens if your child really can't independently access the school platform? And what happens if you can't invite the one-on-one that used to come to your child's home or adult's home into your space? So the stress and the resilience of these families is really to be commended, and it's also to be noticed that there are people in our community who just can't be able to access the community the way other people have been able to. And so this has tremendously added to the challenges.
I'll bet. Thank you. Beth?
Yeah, so Amian, can you give us an example or two of specifically how a problem, any one of the problems you have mentioned, is addressed during this time or has been addressed?
So we've had a real uptick in families needing support through Maryland SNAP, which is the advocacy project that we mentioned. We have had 5 or more new families every month since the onset of COVID. And that means that families who are trying to access IEP support, some kind of individualized education plan support, they just need more resources to be able to access the services that they're entitled to in the system. We've also had an uptick in requests for funding. For, as an example, the Jill Fox Memorial Fund services families who need to be able to access certain things that aren't covered by medical insurance. And so if a family was accessing certain things in their school environment, like materials that they needed for occupational therapy or other things, they now need to find other ways of accessing those materials and resources and support. So that has been another example. And then I think that at the same time, we have kids who participate in our Karma Dogs program. Karma Dogs is a lovely opportunity, particularly focusing on kids who are reluctant readers. So they might not have a diagnosis per se, but historically what they've done is come to our office and read to therapy dogs in the library, and they're able to read Jewish books. It's really fun and so invigorating to be able to watch it. But now we thought, what are we going to do? because you can't be in the office in the library with the dogs. We are the only people in the country, as far as we know, that have worked with the Karma dogs to be able to do a virtual version. We weren't really sure what that was going to be like. To go into a Zoom room with the dog is not quite the same as petting the dog, but we have testaments from families that it has been so wonderful for their kids, and that they have, just like they do in person, been able to practice their reading and read much more, for much more sustained, like longer time than they would otherwise have, given the therapy dogs in the Zoom room. So that's been a kind of exciting.
That's the most wonderful story to hear. to think of a dog being the greatest audience, the
Isn't
right
it great?
dog. That's really a warm and fuzzy. Sorry to interrupt, Jonathan. Go ahead.
No, I think that could be relaxing for all of us. I mean, COVID
Come on down, Jonathan. Anytime you want to read to the dogs, it's the first Tuesday of every month. You can do that.
I love it. Well, and so let's just go there for a quick second. So, look, this community prides itself on its volunteerism. So, how, whether it's working with JVS, do you look for volunteers throughout the year to help to specific families? And if so, what volunteer opportunities are there, and how do they get in touch with you? Let's just go there right now.
Sure. So here's a great example. When we think of all of the access that we're able to provide to the community, because we're all now on Zoom and we're all able to join up and everything. Well, there are families in our community who are not able to access that, in particular, the families who are deaf or hard of hearing. And it's been really challenging. In addition to being able to get critical information, they need to be able to build community, just like the rest of us have been able to do in our virtual worlds. So we have worked with JVC, with Jewish Volunteer Connection, and with other programs to be able to caption videos and information for the people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And that has been a tremendous community builder for people. Certainly people who have pets and would like to be the recipient of being a reader, since we have that warm fuzzy story, are being able to go on to Zoom in a way that they might not have been in the past. But I think that that's an example. Baltimore Hebrew Congregation jumped on this opportunity to be able to actually caption their Shabbat services. And they've been able to provide that for their whole community, and it has been a tremendous support. So that would be an example of something that I think would really support the families, and in particular, that kind of micro community.
Wonderful. Beth?
Yeah, this really, I guess, I mean, particularly as a former teacher myself, this is just so interesting. And I often say to my friends who complain about being stuck in a COVID, at least we're past the age of having little children, because I really give, such credit to parents who are dealing with this. How about hybrids, when some people are returning to school, there's part-time, there's, this combined, what they're calling hybrid education? Does that create special problems?
Sure. I had a friend text me this morning saying this virtual learning thing is not working so well. So it's definitely challenging. We have provided some professional development support, and in fact on our website are some videos for educators to think about what they now call concurrent learning. It's an opportunity for people who are teaching a kid who's right in front of them and a kid who's online at the same time. So they've even come up with it's not such a new phrase, but it's new for us. So we're trying to provide support for that in professional development. And I think that it's critically important that families give themselves the respect and honor that they're due for doing the best that they can. This is a tremendously challenging time. There's a lot of discussion about learning loss for all children, and this is particularly challenging. We do have some resources of things that might help a child, in addition to helping the teachers, having some kind of sensory materials, things like weighted vests, other things that might be calming for a child if they're feeling stressed during that virtual experience. So for all of those, we have resources as well.
You know, Amy, and here's something to think about. There clearly are some silver linings from the entire world spending almost a year in lockdown. You know, business, nonprofits, I'd imagine the Associated, JMOR, we're going to do things differently the way we communicate with our constituencies and our audiences and our volunteers and our donors. I mean, do you see any silver linings from COVID that CJE might take and put into practice once we get back to normal? And does anything come to mind?
Yeah, well, we have something called an ASL meetup. It's for people who want to convene and practice their sign language, or for the deaf community that communicates primarily through sign language. And we have monthly had an ASL meetup. Usually we get to meet in the lobby area outside of the Chef Dan's Cafe in the Park Heights JCC. We have about 10 participants. Now, because we've been doing this virtually, we have tripled the participation.
Wow.
And through word of mouth, people have been coming from places like Belgium and Germany and all over the United States to participate, because it's a way of building community. So I imagine that going forward, we're going to figure out, somebody mentioned hybrid, we're going to figure out how to have both the in-person component and the virtual component. Another example of that is Kol Echad. We coordinate on behalf of a network of synagogues to be able to provide a sort of sensory friendly experience, accessible experience, so that families who have kids who might not be able to sit for the length of time in a regular shul synagogue service can participate. Well, we've been doing that a little bit virtually, and that has also increased the participation, where families who couldn't find their way to get out of the house before have been able to join. And I think even the Be More Inclusive trainings, which are meant to help provide ways for our community to be more inclusive to people with disabilities, we've been able to reach more people by we deliver kits, and then we provide the training virtually. And it's those things I think are going to stick. We're all going to have to be flexible and reimagine how we engage.
Wonderful. No, I love those examples. What great learnings. Beth?
And Amian, you've mentioned a couple times, particularly the Baltimore Hebrew example with, them having the subtitles to whatever's going on. How certainly Jewish life's been very much impacted. So maybe even backing up to things that existed before and may exist again in person, as well as what remote learning or opportunities there are to connect Jewishly for people with learning disabilities or other types of disabilities.
So did you ask what other opportunities are there?
Right, I'm talking about religious, to get connected religiously during this time.
So I think families have, the congregations, many of them have really stepped up to try to find ways to make sure that they're including everybody. So you asked Jonathan actually before about, what are things that volunteers can do? Well, just reaching out and making a phone call to someone, I believe that there's a network of synagogues really investing in that. We want to make sure that families feel included. Every single person in our community really counts. It's not only that we're trying to make ourselves feel good by doing good works, it's that our community is poorer if we don't include everybody and everybody's strengths. So I'm not sure if that's a direct answer to your question, but I'm urging us all to be able to think about it as we launch into this month of disability and inclusion, to be able to really think about how we welcome people and what we can do. So there are some programs and services, but there's always room for more.
Wonderful.
So I guess really what I was looking a little more for, but thank you. I mean, what you said was beautiful. And I want people to know that if they do have someone in their family, whether it's a child or an older adult or anyone at any age along the continuum who has some sort of a disability, I guess I want to just encourage them. So what's out there, it's so important what you're here telling us today, and the ways for people to be brave, to access something because there are programs and there is help out there. So that's really what I wanted to emphasize. And so make sure you tell us, because you could tell us again and again how to get in touch. I mean, anything from filling out an IEP to, the kinds of services you have. How do I get in touch with you to make sure I get myself included?
Absolutely. So one way is to email, if specifically on IEP support or advocacy, Maryland SNAP, MDSNAP, Maryland SNAP at cjeb.org. And the other is to call our team. And Rachel Turniansky, who is the Director of Disability and Inclusion Services at CJE, can help put people in touch with the myriad of services within our own agency and beyond. That's 410-735-5022. And BJAA, the Baltimore Jewish Abilities Alliance, there's a website and you can look for all of the different opportunities available there as well.
So, Amian, before we wrap up, and you mentioned it, that February is Jewish Disabilities Awareness and Inclusion Month. Talk a little bit more about what does that mean? Is there a special day? What special opportunities are out there to support families and students in learnings? Enlighten us a little bit on that.
Sure. So in 2009, two Jewish disability advocates, Shelley Christensen and Lenore Lehman, came up with an idea for this Jewish disability. At the time, it was called Jewish Disability Awareness Month. It was missing the I. We're going to talk about that in a second,
Okay.
But it was JDAM, and they brought it to the Consortium of Jewish Special Educators. And it really caught the imagination of people to be able to say, let's use this as a vehicle for launching opportunities all year round, and just to raise awareness. And so they added the I don't know exactly when the I was added, but I think it's a huge, I standing for inclusion is really important. It's not just that there's awareness, it's that we have to actively do something to be able to think about including people. We have, from our Jewish values perspective, in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, it says that all people were created in the image of God, and that every person, God had the capacity to mint every person from one dye. Like if we as people in the United States mint, we use one dye and it creates everything to look identical. But in our world, we know that everybody is different and everybody comes with their unique strengths. And it's only when we all work together. So that was really the concept behind JDAM, that it was a unified national initiative in order, during the month of February, to raise disability awareness and to support efforts to foster inclusion in our Jewish community. And that really to have this full, rich spectrum of Jewish community is what makes us a strong and vibrant Jewish community.
Thank you.
I took notes. I'm such a dork, but I seriously, what you just said and talking about how, God creating all of us from one dye was very special. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. And is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up?
Well, I guess I would like to just state, as you said, what are the ways in which families can connect? And I just wanted to reiterate that I actually asked a few friends to help me gather a list of what kinds of advice would I want to be able to give. And I thought it was so touching what they said: to be kind to yourself if you're a parent of a child with a disability, to know that the child that you love is the same child before or after diagnosis, to be able to build your support network and rely on us in the community to be able to help connect you. That you should never go to a meeting alone. You should never go to an IEP meeting alone, because there's somebody there to be able to help you. That you should open a 529 account, important technical thing. And that people should feel that they can access and educate themselves, empower themselves, because they are the right parent for this child. And that we are the right community to be able to embrace every person. And that if you need support, we all need support, and we all need to be able to embrace the community, so that people should really just reach out. That's the message that I thought was really, really powerful from my colleagues and friends.
So beautiful. Thank you, Amian. It was wonderful to get to see you, even just on a screen. You always have such pearls of wisdom, and thank you so much for the work you do through CJE, which I remind everybody is an agency of the Associated. And thank you so much for being here and sharing this today.
Thank
I
you so
want to
much,
ask,
Amian.
yeah, sorry, Jonathan.
Yep.
Let me talk a little more about us on the upside. Join us again at noon next week. Next week, we're going to be joined by Noam Weissman from Open Door Media. Open Door Media is a leading global creator of Jewish film content. And Noam will be on the panel with Lisa Bodziner from Towson Hillel. The two of them are going to be talking about what's happening on college campuses, everything from anti-Semitism and the BDS movement to just the American Jewish experience on college campuses today. So it should be a fabulous show. Please tell your friends, and please also tell your friends who may have missed this, that this was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for people who have anyone in their family with a learning difference or with a disability. Please make sure they tune in and learn about what we have to offer. In the meantime, as always, continue to visit associated.org and jmoreliving.com for more information and stories and resources. And you can sign up for our weekly newsletter. Until we meet again, please, everyone, stay well.
Thank you all. Thank you, Amian.